In March 1946, inside the city of Budapest in Hungary, a woman shuffled out of her prison cell and she was walked by guards to an execution post which was set up outside the Budapest Academy of Music. This was a very public execution, and thousands had gathered to see her execution and death. This woman was Maria Nagy, who wore a headscarf and appeared rather frail. She was condemned to death at the People's Tribunal, and it was said that her crime was linked to the persecution of women during the Second World War. Her execution method was pole hanging, or the Austrian gallows, a method which required skill from the executioner and his assistant, and if it went wrong, often someone slowly strangled to death and twitched for many minutes when the slight drop was released. But to those people who witnessed her execution, many had no idea about what Maria Nagy had actually done, and still today her crimes are not the most well documented, but witnessing her execution would have been brutal. Inside of Hungary and Czechoslovakia, one of the most prominent methods of execution used during the 20th century was pole hanging. It was known also as the Austrian gallows, and instead of using a trapdoor gallows or a crossbeam, the executioner and his assistant utilised roughly a 3-metre pole or post, which was cemented into the ground. It required more than one executioner, and they had to work together to ensure it could be performed successfully. With pole hangings, the condemned was led up to the post, and they were then suspended off the ground using a chest sling. The arms would be tied in front of them to ensure they could not move too much. After they were held in mid-air, the executioner and his assistant passed a series of ropes around the top and bottom of the post, through pulleys, and then secured everything. Then the noose was placed around the neck. When the sign was given that everything was tied properly, the execution then began. The condemned on the post dropped a small distance, and the executioner was often stood behind on a step or a ladder, and it was his job to force the head to the side to try and dislocate the neck manually. Skilled executioners claimed this was more effective than using a gallows, but often it was not carried out well, and a white sheet was then thrown over the condemned when they were in the final throes of death, so the crowd could not see this. Now, the limited information we have about Maria Nagy is that she was sentenced to death for being a war criminal, who tortured specifically Jewish women. Presumably with this we must assume that she worked inside of a concentration or extermination camp, and she did have a Czech name. We must also assume that with this she betrayed her people and country, and sided with the Nazi enemy and the German occupation. She could also have collaborated by hunting down Jewish people, who were then passed over to the Gestapo, and who were then sent to camps such as Auschwitz and killed. Some sources claim that she was just 35 years old when she was hanged, but she certainly appeared much older. She may have even worked for the Nazis and collaborated by providing them with translation services. This was a common job for women, and they were involved in interrogations, but their actions contributed to the death sentences and executions of many resistors and brave civilians. She was nonetheless led up to the 3-metre post, and the executioner and his assistant worked swiftly to ensure the ropes were secured in the correct manner, and they then released the drop. Now, witnessing her execution was not an easy ordeal for those inside of Budapest. She was hanged next to the remains of someone who had been covered in a white sheet, meaning that Maria's execution was one in a number of executions that day. Now, pole hanging, as mentioned, often went wrong. Often the drop did not snap the neck, and the executioner's efforts to push the head to the side and dislocate the neck did not have enough force. As the rope snapped taut around the neck of Maria Nagy, she may have struggled and kicked for some time, and she could have slowly strangled to death, kicking and moving on the post. She would then, after the drop was released, have been covered up by the white sheet, so people did not see her final seconds, as the life was literally choked out of her. Now, pole hangings were not easy for crowds to watch, but many people flocked to witness these sort of executions. The crimes of Maria Nagy may not be the most well documented, but in front of a large crowd of witnesses, the noose snapped taut around her neck. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.